Welcome back to the Rally Room, where we continue the conversation beyond marching, beyond protesting. I'm your host, Emilian Guereca, and together we're going to cover a ton of topics today. We're going to find out what lies were told to us in the State of the Union. I know many of you watched, many of you didn't. I didn't watch last night, but I woke up to the news and I didn't want to add myself into the Nielsen numbers of how many viewers the president had. I just didn't want to spend my time on that. So I gathered up my family and we had taco night. I did have a margarita, so let's get into it. It is Wednesday, so by the time this episode comes out, it will be Friday. I'm going to ask you to send me your questions. I'm going to ask you to send me any feedback. I know that I've gotten a lot of questions around what are we doing? We should be doing more. The realistic part is that we are doing a lot and we should be doing more, and it should not feel this taxing on us every single day. So I'm going to lead it with that. I'm going to ask folks to be gentle with themselves, be gentle around how much media we take in, but also how we internalize it, how we continuously are asked to do more with less. So let's get into it. It's Wednesday, February 25th, and somehow it feels like it's October of an election year, which it is an election year, but it's only February. So we're dealing with a constitutional crisis and a recession, and it's all wrapped on into February. So we're talking three things today. So the president gave a State of the Union, and it was just a grievance State of the Union. The state of the country is really that it's broke, it's unhealthy, and it's divided. And yet we're still being gaslit, right? We're still talking about we're okay and we're doing the best. Not true, not even close. So let's talk about it. So the annual address, it's meant to ground the country and to give us some accountability, right? It's supposed to be a moment of clarity and the direction of the country. Instead, what we got from it was that it was really political theater. It was stretched thin. The speech was full of exaggerations, distortions, outright lies. And so I'm going to get into some of the biggest lies. So on the economy, jobs and investments. So he repeatedly touted that the economy, we are the hottest country in the world. So he's claiming that we have more jobs, more people working today than ever before in the history of the country. The data shows otherwise. So the data shows that the U.S. gained just a little bit over 180,000 jobs in 2025. PolitiFact notes well below the 1.5 million to 2.5 million typical under both the Trump administration's first term and under President Joe Biden. So the numbers are not true. Again, that was one of the biggest lies. And we feel it. We feel it at the grocery store. We feel it at the gas station. So we know that that's not true. Now we're going to fact check on the killer. He spoke about the killer of Irina Saratuska. He introduced the mother, Irina, a Ukrainian woman killed in a train in Charlotte, North Carolina last year. And last year he falsely claimed that the man who stabbed Zarudska was a hardened criminal free to kill in America that came through open borders. And it's not true. The man arrested and charged with killing her is not an immigrant. It's a lie. But this is something that he has insisted upon, and he insists that non-citizens are responsible for the violent crimes throughout USA. But the data shows different. So we know that was a lie. So we're going to fact check the next piece, the energy prices. So he suggested that energy is going down to numbers like that you cannot believe. That's That's what he was saying. But the average household's energy bill went up by 6.7% from 2024 to 2025 in the United States. Since since Trump retook the White House, the utility companies have raised their rates across the board for American families to the tune of about 92 billion. So raising bills uh and the expected increases have been about 18%. That's what the data shows. So again, completely a lie, but also remember that this is the administration that gutted energy assistance, that gutted the assistance that some U.S. families received as energy efficient upgrades. So the administration gutted anything that had to do with assistance. So it eliminated the tax credits for homes on energy assistance programs. So again, the cuts and the government shutdown caused a lot of these delays in disbursement for people around energy assistance. So that was a flat out lie around that. And then we talked about gas prices. So the other fact check is around gas prices. So he touted low gas prices, and I don't know about you, but I'm in Los Angeles, and gas is close to $5 a gallon. So he stated that gas is now below $2.30 a gallon in most states, and in some places $1.99 a gallon. I'm going to ask you to to send me feedback as to how much you are paying for gas, because I know I paid $4.89 a gallon just this morning right before I headed into work. So we know that that is a lie. Gas prices are higher across the country according to AAA. The lowest has been Oklahoma, with some of the places stating it's $2.30 a gallon, and in some states in excess of $4.80, which is where I'm at. All right, so that was a lie. And then we're going to fact check the war and peace. We're talking about the president claiming he ended 8 wars in his first 10 months. I'm going to pause there because we know that's a lie, a bold exaggeration. I think he started more wars than anybody else, but that's my opinion. So the U.S. has been part to 6 peace agreements, and several of them do not even credit him. So others were not considered wars to begin with. So again, just gaslighting and flat out lying by the president. So those were the biggest takeaways as far as lies. And I don't know about you, but what it looked like with J.D. Vance and Mike Johnson right behind him, talk about a total just white America. That's the picture that it sends us. An older white America is what they are trying to give us a picture of. And it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good in terms of, I mean, he was low energy. J.D. Vance just looked sick. I don't know if his eyeliners failed him that day, yesterday. But Mike Johnson was sort of leaning to the side, just probably feeling the way we all feel, like most of this is a lie, and I've got to clap because it's the president and we all have to fall in line. That is who is in his cabinet, folks that fall in line with his lies. So, yeah, that was the State of the Union. So, all right, we're going to keep it moving forward. Send me questions. It's still February, and so it is Black History Month. And so I want to take time to recognize that, many people have contributed to what we see today as democracy, what we are continuing to fight for. Really, really started with the Black people that stood before us and said, enough is enough. So the Black History Month was formally recognized by President Gerald Ford in 1976, but the movement to honor Black history began long before that. So I'm going to say that Black history is American history. Yeah. And when you have a month named for you, you know you're not equal. So when you hear about Black History Month, Hispanic History Month, Women's History Month coming up next, what you know and understand is that you are not equal if you need a month. So with that, I'm going to say honoring Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks reminded us that to bring about change, to not be afraid to take that first step. And it may not be easy, but in her words, we will fail when we fail to try. Words to live by. And then, of course, we've got Martin Luther King. He challenged the government that said that everything was fine while segregation and Jim Crow laws were out there. So he paid for it with his life. So honoring what he stood for, he challenged the government with nonviolence, specifically when we talk about democracy and we talk about nonviolence, and he paid for with his life. Tell us, what does that tell you? What does that tell you? Nonviolence works up until a point. It is a violent government takedown is what is currently happening and will continue to happen. So this isn't new. The violence that we are seeing is not new. Martin Luther King paid with his life, even though he preached and made sure that everything was about nonviolence. And then, of course, one of my sheroes, Shirley Chisholm. So she ran for president when people said it wasn't her turn. She refused to shrink herself to make others comfortable. She was the first Black woman elected to Congress. And I love her saying around, if they do not have a seat for you at the table, bring a folding chair. Make sure you're in the room, because if you're not in the room, you're on the menu. And then, of course, we're talking about John Lewis. He reminded us that democracy requires good trouble. What these leaders faced in government, he made sure that justice was not denied. He talked about denied injustice and what was out there. So he didn't disengage. He continued to talk about staying organized, staying engaged, and talked about good trouble. And again, nonviolence, good trouble, being nonviolent, but continuing to stay engaged in the process of democracy. And then, of course, shout out to all the women yesterday that wore white, honoring the suffragist movement to win the right to vote. And I'm going to say special shout out to Rep. Al Green, who held up a sign. Black people are not apes. Held up a sign because we know that the president had previously circulated a photo of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama as apes on social media. Take a moment to think about what his viewpoint is about Black people. He is a racist president, and he wouldn't take it back. He doubled down on it. And so making sure that we understand at the point that we are in, we have a leader in the White House who's a racist, misogynist, and 34-time convicted felon. All facts. All right. Happy Black History Month. Black history is American history. Yeah. All right, so we're going to continue to talk about the State of the Union, and we want to talk about that we should stop pretending. We should stop pretending that we're all okay. Almost everyone I know has been through a layoff, is going through a layoff, and definitely financial struggles. I'm going to say financially fragile, feeling that way. But also the physical exhaustion of the everyday chaos around the Department of Justice, around Department of Homeland Security, around ICE, around the president embarrassing everyone across the country with his tirades and whatnot. And we are politically fractured. We are. But I do want to say that this isn't not normal, right? It's created chaos. It's not just politics. It's not. We can agree to disagree is what people used to say, but we can no longer agree to disagree when my existence is not valued. So we can't agree to disagree. So I think we're beyond that. It's no longer just about politics. I think that democracy is eroding. I think that I've always said it. We're close to a collapse. I've always said it. When women lose their rights, democracy is at stake. When you look at countries that have decimated women's rights, the next step is that democracy is decimated. That's the trajectory. That's where we're headed. And most people will say it's a slow erosion. It's not. It's not. It's moving really fast. So, right. So the president continues to distort reality, right? And so completely think about, this is the president that is still sending the FBI and Department of Justice to check on voter rolls for 2020. He's petty. He lacks the ability to tell the truth, and he's definitely believes that he should not be held accountable. This is the same president that doubled down, tripled down on that immigrant that said something like immigrant on his knuckles, and I forget the actual words around it, but they told him that it was AI. They told him and then showed him, and he doubled down. He refused to acknowledge that he was wrong. So this is who we're dealing with. So lack of accountability, but also unable to admit when he is wrong. Not who we want as president. All right. That brings us to the rally point. What are we talking about in the rally point? Take a breath. Yes. So the rally point today is, again, we're not going to stop. Jeffrey Epstein is dead, but his work is not dead. His network is still here. The Department of Justice has talked about, according to NPR, who handled the investigation, that the president was named in some files that were not released, that have not been released. So it's a legitimate matter of scrutiny. This is serious. Department of Justice acknowledges that some of the Epstein-related materials connected to the president were withheld and or removed. So there are files where he is specifically named in conjunction with what Epstein was doing, not just named here and there, but they were withheld and or removed. And the question is why? Why did NPR have to go in and go through this investigation in order for us to then get the acknowledgement from the Department of Justice that yes, they were withheld? So if transparency mattered, then why doesn't it matter now? This is the president that was going to drain the swamp. He's not draining the swamp. He is the swamp. He is. And so, right? So if accountability mattered, when hearings were out there, why didn't we get this? Right? We were told for years that the mishandle of emails threatened national security from Hillary Clinton. And yet we keep hearing that there are files that were so redacted. Now some that are being withheld, some that have not been released, that specifically name the president thousands of times. Why? Why? Why are we not getting everything out? And is it that it is trafficked minors? Is it that it's young girls, how we value them? I personally believe that's part of it. I believe that it is because of the way we see young girls, young women, and women. We don't value them. And so this is about trafficked minors. It is about minors and their silence. Why the redactions? Why the removal of the president's name? What is he hiding? What is the Department of Justice hiding? Because keep in mind, this goes down the rabbit hole, right? This goes down to Bill Barr with Epstein, his dad, who Epstein worked for, and published a book about a state where minors will be held as sex slaves. Yes, Bill Barr's dad, who then ends up being the attorney general, who then ends up saying that Epstein actually committed suicide. So if you follow the rabbit hole, Epstein was so well connected and the signs were all there about this, and the silence is still out there. And so we're asking, why the removal of the files? Why not disclose it? We are asking for them to be released. We are asking for the president to be accountable. I think the president should be impeached, should be removed, right? Just today, we had Larry Summers from the Harvard University remove himself. He's retiring. We've got Lex Wexner talking about how they're removing him from certain things. The ex-Prince Andrew has been stripped of his title and was arrested recently, right? We're talking about Bill Gates now disclosing that he was having affairs with Russian women, but didn't have anything to do with Epstein, according to him. So all of these people are coming up with their indiscretions. They're being removed from their jobs. They're being asked to leave, or they themselves are resigning. But President Trump is silent about it. This is the guy that can't stop talking, tweeting at 2, 3 in the morning about anything and everything that comes to his head. But at this point, all silence around the Epstein files. What is he hiding? So, all right. So with that, we are going to close it up. I have a few questions. Someone is asking, should the president resign? The president should resign, but he's never going to resign. So we should be asking for his removal, his impeachment. We know that is what's at stake coming into the midterms. So the other piece around it is that his party needs to ask him to resign. His party needs to ask for accountability. That is what we need to do. Why? Because we understand and know the pressure works. Pressure works, but only if we sustain it, only if we hold them accountable. So I'm Emilian Guereca. I'm your host at the Rally Room. Hit subscribe, hit like, send me your questions, and we're going to continue to hold them accountable. All right. Next month is Women's History Month, and we're going to celebrate all the women in the world. So, all right. See you next week. Thank you for joining me.